I mean, for starters, today, Donald Trump made his most explicit comments yet about his openness to deporting American citizens. And yes, his intention is to scare you. And yeah, the things he's saying are scary. I'm not going to minimize that. But his comments are also a reminder that aspiring dictators, of which he is one, who threaten to deport their own citizens, are not speaking from a position of strength. They are speaking from a position of weakness. And the cracks are showing all over the place right now. And so tonight I actually wanted to start in one of the places where the cracks are the biggest and most obvious. And that's the economy, where Trump's on-again, off-again tariffs have everyone from conservative Republicans to Wall Street billionaires to even rural farmers saying, what in the world is that guy doing? And we're seeing that sentiment very clearly in the polls, too. I mean, in a new CBS YouGov poll that was released just yesterday, a majority of Americans said the economy is getting worse. And a growing number of Americans say Trump's policies are making them financially worse off. You can see the chart on the screen right now, and you can see it shows a 7-point jump on that question from just last month. The majority of Americans are also against Trump's tariff and trade policy. But the news gets even worse for Trump. Get a load of this. When the people in this poll were asked who would benefit most from Trump's tariffs, 3/4 of Americans said the wealthy, and 71% said large corporations. I think everybody knows how popular the wealthy and large corporations are. Not very popular at all. Just imagine how well it's going to sit with the majority of Americans when Congress returns in May, just in a couple weeks, and focuses all their time on cutting taxes for the wealthy and large corporations, which is what they're going to do. But the upshot is this. Trump is underwater. He's losing popularity faster than any new president has in recent history, other than, well, of course, Donald Trump in 2017. But it's really not a mystery as to why. I mean, weirdly, not much has changed since James Carville proclaimed that one of the core messages for a presidential campaign was, it's the economy, stupid. And right now, Trump's actions have created an enormous amount of confusion and instability in the economy. I mean, he single-handedly issued a decree that Chinese imports will get tariffs of 20%. Wait, no, 104%. No, 125. Hang on. Now it's 145%. Oh, but smartphones and computers are exempt, at least for now. You can't make plans around that. No one can. Whether you're putting together a household budget or a business plan for a small business or a huge company. And some of the sectors that are being hit the hardest are the ones that elected him to begin with. Sectors like farmers in North Carolina. I mean, this was in the Washington Post this morning. Quote, midway through the spring planting season, farmers in a state whose electoral votes went to Trump in the past 3 elections are struggling with the unpredictability of his tariffs, which threaten their access to foreign markets and add a heavy dose of uncertainty to an already capricious undertaking. Should they plant more soybeans? Well, most of that crop gets sold to China, but maybe not now, I guess. Whenever you do to plant now, you have to hope Trump doesn't kill the foreign market for that crop before you harvest in a few months. That's how they have to plan, just like any business. It's that kind of uncertainty that has absolutely pounded the stock market, a huge number of industries, and also Americans' 401k accounts. But here's another thing that stuck out to me about the complete mismanagement of all of this by the Trump administration. They seem to be some sort of a state of aloof denial about the impact this chaos and uncertainty is having on real people. I mean, remember, according to Trump's Treasury Secretary, nobody's paying any attention out there.
What is your message to Americans who want to retire right now and who've just seen their lifetime savings drop significantly?
Well, Kristen, I think that's a false narrative. Americans who want to retire right now, the Americans who have put away for years in their savings accounts, I think they don't look at the day-to-day fluctuations of what's happening.
I mean, the thing is, that's not true, obviously. But the New York Times did something that's pretty interesting to sort of illustrate this point. They asked Americans near retirement what they thought of Besson's comment that I just played. And 400 people responded. People like Becky O'Hara of Havertown, Pennsylvania, who said, quote, we are definitely looking at the fluctuations and likely adding time to our need to work timeline. Mr. Besson is mistaken. Or Nancy London of Plain City, Ohio, who said this, I have Parkinson's disease and I'm unable to work in any capacity. Naturally, I closely watch how the market performs on a daily basis. Or Barbara Costanzo of Milwaukee, who is even more blunt, saying, quote, they have no idea how ordinary people live. Same with Cleo LaRue of League City, Texas, who said, of course I'm watching. I'm disheartened that he and President Trump seem to be treating my hard-earned savings in such a cavalier manner. And people like Karen Walworth of Beaverton, Oregon, are understandably worried about how this impacts her retirement plan. She said, I wanted to retire and still wait until 70 to collect Social Security. And that's a delicate balance if the value of my investments has dropped significantly. And I think many people can sympathize with Jean Teague of Austin, Texas, who said this. Yes, I'm checking. It's a compulsive behavior right now, though I haven't looked yet today. Why? I do not know. Please, no tariffs on Xanax. Many people see you, Jean. The point is, everyone's paying attention. Wall Street's paying attention. Republicans are paying attention. Farmers in North Carolina are paying attention. Of course they are. It impacts their businesses. Basically, every American in every corner of the country is paying attention. The whole tariff saga is hurting Trump politically because it is hurting so many Americans directly. This is obviously breaking through because it affects everyone. Now, the conventional wisdom says that won't happen on other issues Trump's taking a hard line on, like, say, immigration. But I think in this moment, that's actually wrong. I mean, I get, like, at first glance, people might not universally feel that the story of Kilmar Abrego Garcia applies to them like tariffs do. Even if you feel horrified and outraged, maybe it feels far away. Maybe it feels like it could never happen to you or anyone you know. But it's not. And it could happen to you or someone you know. I know everybody watching right now has probably followed this story, but it's still worth restating. I mean, Abrego Garcia is a Maryland father and legal U.S. resident who was deported to a mega prison in El Salvador in a move the government has admitted happened by mistake. At no point has anyone in the U.S. or in El Salvador charged him with a crime. And so the Supreme Court said the Trump administration needs to get him back and can't deport him without a trial. But Trump's ignoring all of that, saying it's up to El Salvador's dictator to determine whether or not a legal U.S. resident gets to come back to the country or spend the rest of his life in a prison abroad. And if that weren't horrifying enough, which it absolutely should be, Trump took things one big step further during his meeting with the president of El Salvador today.
Homegrown criminals next. Yeah. I said, homegrowns are next. The homegrown's built. You got to build about 5 more places.
Yeah, that's big.
All right. It's not big enough.
5 more places, which you just heard him say. Now, to be clear, by 5 more places, Trump means 5 more prison camps. And by homegrowns are next, he means American citizens are next. If that wasn't clear enough, he said it out loud in the Oval Office just moments later.
I'd like to go a step further. I mean, I said it to Pam. I don't know what the laws are. We always have to obey the laws, but we also have homegrown criminals that push people into subways. I'd like to include them in the group of people to get them out of the country.
I mean, so today it's homegrown criminals who push people into subways, as Trump defines them, by the way. But tomorrow, could it be lawyers, journalists, Democrats, people Donald Trump just doesn't like? We've heard a million times from his lackeys that he's just joking, he's just saying that, it's not actual policy. But the thing is, what he's saying is also pretty consistent with what his administration is doing behind the scenes. Like having DHS demand the updated personal information from the IRS of upwards of 7 million undocumented immigrants who pay taxes. Like having Social Security declare undocumented immigrants dead to revoke their Social Security numbers and prevent them from earning wages. Like having DHS stalk social media accounts of students here legally on visas in search of a justification to deport them. The case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia is not isolated. It could be just an early indication of larger plans. I mean, every action I just listed, and there are more than that, tells us that at a minimum, this administration is preparing to go after more students, to illegally send more illegal residents out of the country, to go to the neighborhoods of more people living in this country to scare them and attempt to kick them out. If the courts don't enforce the law, and if leaders in Congress and states don't do enough to fight it, what's going to stop the Trump administration from attempting to do the same thing to U.S. citizens? I mean, today we got reporting about an immigration lawyer in Massachusetts, and a born and raised American citizen, by the way, who got a notice from the Department of Homeland Security saying this: it's time for you to leave the United States. And do not attempt to remain in the United States. The federal government will find you. Now, this lawyer is pretty sure she received the letter in error, and she probably did. But now we know how this administration feels about deporting American citizens. Trump said it himself today. We also know how they feel about what happens when they deport someone by mistake. It's not their responsibility. Look, as I said, the tariff issue is breaking through because it affects everyone. Of course it does. And maybe this president's immigration policy still feels far away, like it won't impact you, like it won't impact your neighbor. But based on everything we heard from Donald Trump and everything he said today, based on everything his administration is doing behind the scenes to turn those words into actions, or at least be prepared to, it could start to feel closer and closer and closer to all of us. Bear with me for just like a moment here for a little bit of an American history class. But we've been down this road before, which is important to remember. I mean, one of the grievances against the British listed in the Declaration of Independence was that they would send Americans overseas for trial. And at least once before, the Supreme Court rejected a U.S. effort to send people to be tried abroad because of concerns that the same could be done to American citizens. In 1841, another Massachusetts resident, former President John Quincy Adams, right there in that picture, argued before the Supreme Court in the famed Amistad case, defending the enslaved Africans who revolted and took over a Spanish ship. Now, the U.S. government argued that the Africans should be sent back to Africa and tried in court overseas. But Adams won the case, arguing, quote, if the president has the power to do it in the case of Africans and send them beyond seas for trial, he could do it by the same authority in the case of American citizens. He said that in 1841, nearly 200 years ago. But it was the Supreme Court that agreed and stopped the government from doing so. But this time around, Donald Trump is defying the Supreme Court. He's ignoring them. And the judicial branch may not be able to stop Trump and the executive branch on its own. That leaves one other branch. And yes, Republicans are in charge of both the House and the Senate, but there are powers that every member of Congress can use to fight back, including the power to use their platforms, draw attention, and call things out.